we are here because Citizens Committee believes in bringing New Yorkers together to improve neighborhoods. And it's almost a heavy task right now because coming together as a community has never been more important. Together means recognizing all the individuals where they sit, but not having that be a problem, but having that be an asset.
Citizens has always been at the forefront of helping neighborhood residents achieve their goals. So yeah, this pandemic has really brought so many of us together. I think so many of us at times have been in isolation, but what we're doing now, folks, is that we're coming together as New Yorkers, we're coming together as communities to make sure post-COVID that we continue to work together, that we continue to make sure our communities are fed, that we continue to make sure that we have the resources to maintain the health and well-being of our community.
You really helped me get started with both the grants. That was my first grants I've ever received, from the beauty grant and the special needs grant. And you guys gave me that platform to get more people on board with me and the movement. And it's not done. So I'm very grateful for you guys.
You want to make sure that people see you and that they hear you and that they can get behind you, so we can all get behind each other as New York City. Good afternoon. Dr. Rasan Harris here from Citizens Committee for New York City. Thank you for joining us for another conversation. We started it calling them COVID conversations because we wanted to make sure that you knew that we were here for New York City in this time of crisis. And then the second pandemic hit, the one of social injustice and a need for us to recognize that all people need opportunity and need to be treated equally by the different institutions that are here in the United States of America. And so through both pandemics, we are, as Citizens Committee, going back to our founding, and we know that we need to save our city. And who will save our city? We will save our city. We were founded in 1975 by a bunch of volunteers that gave of themselves, not because of their position, but because they love New York City. And they took the charge, and history is written about them and what they've done for New York City in a time of need. Right now, New York City is looking for its newest round of heroes to help rebuild her. So these conversations have gone from COVID conversations to conversations about rebuilding, conversations about who are the heroes that history books will acknowledge of being present and staying with New York City in a great time of need. And I'm just really excited to have your involvement as Citizens Committee for New York City supports local block level leaders across New York City. And we are lifting up the stories of how individuals can be the heroes that will go down in history. We're really excited to have a conversation today. During this Hispanic History Month, Heritage Month, by some other individuals, because we want to recognize all these different identities. New York City is made up of individuals from all different backgrounds, and we want to lift up different identities that are making a huge difference, that sometimes might be overlooked or seen sometimes as the problem. But in this case, we're lifting up different perspectives that shows that all of us can be part of the solution. So I'm excited to have some civically engaged Black men that are doing the work. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ernie Lyles and Ray McGuire that will have a conversation about what it means to show up in this moment to provide leadership when New York City needs you.
Thanks, Simon. It's great to meet you. It'd be great to, great to be a part.
And guys, have a great conversation. Look, joining you later.
Thank you.
Ray.
Ernie.
Who would have thought we would take it this far, huh?
Oh, Ernie, I don't know how you got this done, man. Ernie, I'm telling you, man, this is all right. Ernie Lyles, my man.
I haven't failed you yet, or I haven't tried to, so we're pushing through. But
Ernie, you've been showing up. You've been going all in for a lot of years now. Right. What we doing today, Flex? What we doing today?
we're trying to we're still making it happen. And today we're going to talk about building people, building companies, and building community. And I think one of the things that you've always taught me is to be on time and on schedule. So I'm going to be cognizant of our time and schedule, but I'm also going to make every minute count. So I want to start out. There's a little bit about me. Everybody can read sort of my bio online or whatever. I'm always accessible, but this is really about hearing from the real hero, at least in my life and across Wall Street, across New York City, and even back home. I just want folks to have a little bit of sense as we continue to talk throughout this conversation about who you are, Ray. It's easy to see you, in magazines, video, camera, CNBC, et cetera. But tell us how you sort of have come to become who you are growing up and, where you are today.
Well, thank you. Listen, I'm honored to be with you all. It is a true blessing. I am today who I always have been. Maybe I dress up a little differently, but I'm from the neighborhood, always have been, and I'm proud of that. I started this journey a long time ago, and I do often say start from the bottom. Now we hear, because that's where, we never thought it was the bottom, but working class neighborhood, raised by my single mother, me and my two older brothers, and our grandparents. And, I don't know how far back you want to go, but I guess I got to say, when I started, I was in school in the neighborhood. And then in 6th grade, 5th grade, there was a teacher who said, I think you got a little bit going on here. Mm-hmm. You might want to think about going to this new school that had been created by some pretty well-to-do people in the suburbs. They lent their names to companies, and she called my mother and asked, maybe we can go here. And we didn't have the money to go there, but we applied. And so from 6th grade until the 11th grade, I was at the school. I walked probably a mile or so to get to the bus. The bus took me to the school, and I was there from 6th grade to 11th grade. In the 11th grade, Ernie, I had a 4.0 A average. I was president of the school, and I had a 28 point per game average playing basketball. I used to rain on them kids. 28 points per game. I got up, I think the highest I got was 48 points a game. I had I had like 3 or 4 40-point games. So
were you ducking?
Huh? Oh man. Ernie, I never saw. I'm like, y'all don't know about this. There was a guy named Rick Mount out of Purdue. He never saw a shot he never saw a slump he couldn't shoot out of. So, and I had a pretty good percentage. This is long before anybody thought about a 3-point. I figured if I crossed the line, matter of fact, if I got into the gym, I could hit the shot. All I had to do was get in the gym. So I got in the gym a lot, and I killed a lot of kids out there. It was, you have no mercy when you're doing this. So it was no mercy. And I'm okay with that. That's how you drop 48 on them at any given time. And it's documented. It's all documented. And so,
I'm gonna go check it. I've also need some street cred, so I want a couple of name references, a little bit later. I'll get those.
I can show it to you. You want me to scan and
No. I know we cognizant of time.
I put stuff on hold now, and I can pull it up. So anyway, so I did that, and then in 11th grade, there was a teacher who said, "You got all this stuff. If you're as good as they say you are, why don't you go test yourself against the big boys and girls in the East?" I said, "Okay, where are they?" And so I flew to Bradley Field. I don't know how we got the money, because it was an airplane. This was like big deal. We flew to Bradley Field, which is now Bradley International Airport. And I landed at a school called Hotchkiss, which is in Lakeville, Connecticut. And from Hotchkiss, I applied to 6 colleges. This is my senior year, so I kind of threw everything up in the air and went my senior year. And then from Hotchkiss, I applied to 6 colleges: Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Amherst, Johns Hopkins, and Northwestern. And I decided to go to Harvard. And then I was going to be pre-med and pre-law based on a couple of television characters. One was Ben Casey, and the other was Perry Mason.
Interesting.
So I get, you go to these classes, and I get to the early classes in freshman week, and this is just pre-med stuff, and it's so painful now, but I can recount it. It was either chemistry or biology or some kind of class like that, and I get there early. You reference time, so if you can't be on time, be early. And I get there, and the first 10 rows are filled with, Ernie, frankly, people like you with those multicolored pens,
Yeah.
black, red, green pens. And so I get there, and the professor starts talking, and it's a language which I had zero familiarity. So I figured from that point on, I'm not going to work with this pre-med stuff. So, and I went through Harvard College, and I did pretty well. I then decided to apply to business school and law school while at college.
Wow.
And I got into both. And I figured this is all about education, which was in my head. We had no money. I was all scholarship. And between college and graduate school, I had a fellowship to go to France, which is a whole nother story. And I did that. And 36 years ago, I started on Wall Street. 36 years ago this month.
Wow.
In September of 1984.
That's
And
time.
that's kind of the journey. I was able to pay off all the debt. And we had a lot of debt. We borrowed, and my mother was a social worker, and my grandfather worked in the factory. And I can remember on the weekends kind of hanging out with him, and he was a janitor at a jewelry store. Man, I knew everything there was to know about Windex, because I could keep them counters clean so folk can look through and look at the jewelry. They don't do much of that anymore. But I didn't have any swipes on mine. Mine was clean. My stuff was tight. I get them countertops tight, man. You come in and you can look down at them diamonds. Your head was like, you were there. We couldn't touch any of it, but the glass places were clean anyway. And I got a couple dollars, and I felt pretty good about my game there. I got a job. I was good.
And I guess the thing is, right, yours was a sort of lonely journey to some extent. And, you talked about, and I've sort of had this on my own career, where you look for mentors. And, I found my mentor in a book about Vernon Jordan. You found yours in a TV show, Perry Mason, right? And you guided that. But I think, when we talk about personalities and what's going on in your life, you're now in a situation where you're a dad. And not only have you mentored, as I got older, made yourself available to me and I don't know how many others, thousands probably. Can you talk about sort of your journey as a dad and sort of their journeys being a little bit different, I guess, as it's coming up?
It is a tremendous blessing. Tremendous blessing. We have 3 children. We have a 7-year-old who is in second grade. We have an 18-year-old who is doing a postgraduate year at the school that I went to at Hotchkiss. And then we have a 20-year-old who is declared for the NBA draft and waiting for the draft to come up. There's nothing that gives you a greater sense of pride than your family. My wife is extraordinary, so I married up. She's my better 3/4, and I'm good with that. And our kids are, the most important thing about our kids is that, they know who they are, but they also have a sense of value, right? We didn't come by this easy. We came by this the hard way. And if I worry about anything, and you haven't asked me, if I worry about anything, and the reason that I'm motivated to be who I am and do what I do is because of the children, because of the family. When I started this business, it was a frontier. There weren't many examples to which I could look, at least on the client-facing side of the business, who look like me. And I want our kids to be exposed, but I also want our kids, as they get that exposure, to feel really proud about who they are as Black kids. Yeah. There is nothing that they cannot accomplish. It will be hard, notwithstanding the fortunes that we've been able to gather. It will be hard, and it's increasingly more difficult today. That is why the home has to be solid. Growing up, there are 3 or 4 places where we felt safe, and not all of our kids feel safe today. The 3 or 4 places we always felt safe at home. I felt safe at home. I felt safe at school. That's today being challenged. I felt safe in church, and I still feel safe in church. I felt safe in the library. And it used to be when I was crossing them kids over, I felt really safe in the playground. That was our refuge. Today, some of those things no longer exist. So home has to be, if you invest anywhere, you gotta invest in home. You gotta invest in the family. I gotta invest in our children. That is the highest priority, the highest priority. And then when I think about the future, I have a young family, but I think about the future and I think about people like you. You are the future. And if we don't get it right with you, we don't have a future. There is no cavalry coming.
Yeah.
There's no cavalry. This is us. And so that's a responsibility. I've been gifted here, right?
Yeah.
And in these troubled times, my word says, when the foundation crumbles, what will the righteous do? So what will we do? And so we have to take care of home and make certain home is solid. We got to take care of the future, which is you and your generation. And we also have to take care of the least of thee. And so, yes, I make myself available. I'm fortunate to make myself, I'm blessed to make myself available, Ernie. I have every confidence in what you can accomplish. I've seen it. I've seen the work. You put in the hard work. You go all in. The generation's got to go all in. I had no plan B. I got no plan B.
Yeah. I think, it is amazing because, sometimes where people sort of say to like, Ernie, how are you working the way you do? It's because I'm blessed and honored to sort of get these talks at any moment that I need it. And
well,
I think
it's not easy coming through here, Ernie. You know it's not. We don't work on easy paths. You got to.
Nah, it takes a while.
In the analog world, I know y'all do all that digital and TikTok, all the rest of that stuff too. But our relationship is a analog relationship. You got to stop at the toll booth. I got to take the toll. I got to figure out whether you got the right pressure in your tires, Ernie. I got to do that, right? And I know you and Wes and the rest of them like, oh, dang, we got to go deal with this.
Come tight. We practice it.
Get through me. I know you can get through the majority because I've been there, right? I've been in the battles. Like my man Joe Ligon said, I've been through the storm, right?
Amen to that. Maybe a good segue is into the company's piece because, everything is kind of transitioning now. And, for even younger guys, I mean, now I'm 41.
You're young,
but even
you young.
I still got a lot of energy. I agree.
You gonna talk like you an old head. You ain't no old head.
But I need to feel like that. But I think one of the big questions really is now, if you talk about what's actually happening within companies and even junior guys, like I'm just wondering, with COVID and, remote work, and I filled a lot of calls with, new mentees, old mentees, and they're just kind of saying, what do we do? Right. They don't really, I was able to sit in my office and see, my direct reports, learn from the best of them, guys who worked with you for years throughout Wall Street. Like, how are companies navigating that from what you're saying now? And what are you sort of advising them?
Let me separate companies out and let me separate the neighborhood out.
Okay.
The lessons that we always go through, Ernie, is skill set. Make certain that your skill set is as tight as it can get, because if that's not the case, then you're going to be on the service road and you may stay there for a while. So my first lesson is to, notwithstanding all the challenges, we cannot relent from getting the skill set, investing in ourselves, investing in the skills. You got to go all in when that happens. And I remember a young guy, Ken Acuna, came in, he said, Miss McGuire, I got to tell you, I'm putting in the work, and what I recognize is championships are won when no one is looking. Championships are won when no one is looking. And in this really harsh COVID world, I don't in any way downplay the psychological impact this is having. It is pretty significant. So people got to get outside, got to go to the park and hang out with your kids, put on the mask, wear the mask, take the kids to the park, run them around until they tire you out, and then kind of fake like you're just taking a rest on the bench. But you got to go do that, right?
Yeah.
What companies are now faced with is they need to figure out how, at least until we get a vaccine, and at least till we perfect testing, how do you manage your workforce? And people, I think, are being pretty effective at it. But let's not get there. Let me identify three different workforces. There's the essential workers who are at risk every day, every single day. Many of them look like you and me.
Amen.
They're the face-to-face workers, and these are the people whom we interact with on a daily basis. The people who work in retail, the people who work in the stores, the drugstores, the grocery stores, the restaurants. The face-to-face workers are people who also are at risk. They don't get compensated at the highest level, so we need to make certain that we have some kind of safety net for that group. And then we have the remote workers. We can do what we do remotely. Are we at risk differently to the essential workers and the face-to-face workers?
Yeah.
So we have to be able to understand our world, and when we're having challenges, to put it in context. Would you swap your hand for somebody who has to labor through the subway system every day? Right? Many of us have the option to call Uber or to get into a yellow cab. Most people don't have the option. And so we have to be aware of our people when we think about this. So we can't forget the neighborhood, right? We cannot forget the neighborhood and the impact that COVID, the disproportionate impact that COVID is having on our people. Some of us have the option. Many of us have zero option, other than to put ourselves at risk every day to make certain that the people who have are protected and taken care of. And even when they're at risk, we need the essential workers to come in and help us out, if not save us.
Yeah. Yeah. And talking about the neighborhoods, I do want to talk about the community a little bit. And, we're broadcasting live from Harlem as it is. You've been spending a lot of time, and I think people don't really understand how busy you really are. I remember calling you up, right when we saw the murder of George Floyd, and my wife Princess, who works extensively to educate kids, and her team.
Who, by the way,
and
is your better three quarters. Okay, I should be
she is
clear.
without a doubt,
Okay, I
without a
just want to give
doubt.
a shout out appropriately. Okay, but keep going. I didn't want to miss that mile mark because you might keep going. I'm trying to get you where you need to be, right? We're pulling off. We're giving a shout out to Princess. Hello, Princess. If you're listening in, now we go back to you, Ernie. I'm good.
And her partner Tasha, and everybody, Zach Tyler, Tasha beat me up, and the team as well. But I called it. I said, Ray, we've got to do something. We've got commencement speech. Like, this is just insane. These kids are graduating without hope. And I think the call was one of our maybe 3 minutes calls. And you're like, cool, I'm on it when you need it. And as time went on, the world was crazy and crazier. And I was at my mom's. We were all quarantined. And I could see my mom was so proud because, here she was. She would see you on CNBC, noticing that her baby had just had a call, with Ray McGuire, who's on TV. And, I said, man, how could he ever do this? He's got a week to do it. And I'll never forget, man. I think I got the message at 2:45 in the morning, the video, and it was fire. And I texted my boys and I told them, I said, we got some fire coming out. I can't show it to you yet, but we got some fire. And what really stuck to me, you talking about your message around championships are made when people aren't watching. And, your immediate desire to go, the community needs it. Yes, I'm on it. What is driving that? And then maybe we could talk about a little bit more after that, what else the community needs, particularly around this dynamic of census and voting and everything else. But the drive for the community, that drive to say, you know what, 2:45 in the morning, I'm still coming, working hard. Nobody's watching, but I'm going to make sure these kids have this.
Ernie, let me give you a little bit of a response to that. 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. In 1955, Ernie, there was a little black boy, and we forget this. There's a little black boy, 14 years old, named Emmett Till. Smile the wrong way. Lynched and murdered. In December of 1955, there's a black woman who decided not to get off that bus. 1964, 1965, Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act. 1968 may be the height. Civil rights dynamic changed It went from Black folks at the forefront of civil rights. And that language changed up until we got to the 44th president of the United States. And today that narrative would have remained the same if it hadn't been for George Floyd. And so why do we invest? Because if we don't invest in ourselves, it's not clear where it's going to happen. So why am I available? Because I've been so blessed to be able to be in a position where I can make a phone call and ask a question. Why don't you tell me how Ernie Lyles is doing? By virtue of making that call, the conversation changes. But you remember, I didn't get here just by automatically. That's developing a lot of relationships over time. And they asked me, Ernie, how does it, and you know this, how do you get there? And I tell them there are 4 things that have gotten me here, Ernie. Prayer, preparation, performance, and paranoia. You grew up in the neighborhood, you slip up on the court, you know somebody's going to try to rain a 3 or dunk on you. I got that. These kids are always going to try to take you out. And so you recognize that the anchor to who we are rests in that community. So am I responsive? I have to be responsive. I have to be. I don't have an alternative not to respond. And it means that I expand the day to get to answer the community's call, then I expand that day. Make certain Leo is great. Make certain Cole and Ella are great. And make certain, which I never have to check, my wife's got my back. So we're good. We do what it takes by whatever means necessary to make certain that we maintain that whole. We got to stand in the gap. You got to stand in the gap. And I've been blessed. So not everybody has to do this. I want to be clear. Not everybody has to do this. I feel it's part of my calling to be able to give a little bit back. Because what I want in that dash, we all have it. From the gift of birth to the gift of transition. And what I want them to say, I don't want them to have to get me across Jordan. I want to be there already, right? I want to have transition. And what I want them to say is, well done, thou good and faithful servant. That's what I'm looking for. So whatever it takes for me to be in that book, to be able to claim that, I'm good with that. And that's my motivation, right? I got a mother, 94 years old, praying woman every single day. So we're going to be okay. I want to make certain that we collectively are okay. It ain't about me. This is about we. That's how this journey has been outlined for me. And my steps are ordered, and I'm okay with that.
That's powerful. Thank you, Ray. And I think Rasan may have some questions too, but I think folks here are getting a tidbit of what I've been able to get for well over a decade. And in every moment I have. So I'm just thankful to you. Publicly, I'll say that. I always say it together, but I thank you for the investment in me and Princess and the family for sure.
You're welcome. Thank you for you. But you got to keep coming correct, Ernie.
I got the responsibility. Passing the torch. Passing the torch.
There's a torch here. I stand on the shoulders of Vernon Jordan and Frank Thomas and Dick Parsons. We need to pass the torch. That torch needs to remain lit. But what you got? Who you got out there?
Carla, go ahead, Carla. I think you're on mute.
With, Carla?
Thanks. So we're going to start the Q&A portion. Make sure we have enough time to answer some questions. So thank you, Ray and Ernie, for sharing your stories. We have one question from the chat. Someone is asking, will the current focus on gender diversity, particularly visible on the street, detract from or augment other minority groups' efforts?
Particularly visible on the street, detract from or augment. I think it augments. Remember, civil rights is for so long as civil rights stays on mission, it should be for all of those who are aggrieved. So it should not detract from, it should augment as the question is posed. We need to be in this together.
Amen. And I think the leaders have to decide, take the approach. Do they think the pie is only going to be one side or one size, or do they think they can grow it? So if you have a mentality that the pie is going to be stagnant for whatever you're leading, organization you're running, and that's it, then of course people will fight over those smaller pieces and trying to get their little piece. That's probably not a place that's really going to survive, particularly through the next generation of the way the cycles goes. But if you actually are organizations and leaders, whether it's community, companies, et cetera, if they're willing to grow and expand the pie or make multiple pies, then this isn't really even a question we'll have to be that concerned about, because there'll be enough for everyone.
That is 100% correct. If each of us is battling for a smaller pie, that's not sustainable. We have to battle to increase the size of the pie, to Ernie's words, with which I completely agree.
Finally,
Absolutely.
That's rare. That is rare, Ernie. I just want to be clear. Don't think you get the pass.
So Ray, you had a really great message that, for your kids. And Ernie, you mentioned students. So, especially this week with, students going to class in person for the first time. Just wanted to ask if you had a message to those students, who are studying in a very, very difficult, unprecedented era.
I want them to. It's tough to talk to 7, 8-year-olds and tell them how important this is. You got to stay close. You got to read to them. You got to do math with them. You can't. There's no substitute. The screen doesn't substitute for reading at night. Finding 20 minutes to read a story. Finding some time to do math flashcards. Just finding the time to spend with them. The time's not coming back. We're not getting this time back. And so prioritize. I know each of us has got so many things to do. But the thing that we ought to ask ourselves at the end of the day is, how many of those things are more important than spending time with your kids, reading a story? Could you have let 2 or 3 of those texts go? Did you have to respond to Signal? Did you have to be on a WhatsApp chat? Did you have to do that Zoom meeting? All I need is 20 to 30 minutes. That's all I need. And you sit and you read and you count, and you do it not with the screen, but you do it. And even if it's with the screen, why don't you have them read aloud to you, or you read aloud to them? There is no bigger investment. And the really sobering thing about this, if we don't make the investment, it's our fault. These are our kids.
Thanks, Ray. We have a few more questions in the chat. How does, someone's asking, how do you plan to deal with folks that will try to compare you to Bloomberg when running for New York City mayor? And what is your leadership advice?
That presumes that I'm running for New York City mayor. So nice try. Nice try. I'm me.
Yeah.
I'm me. I respect Bloomberg, but he ain't started from the bottom like I did. Or maybe he did. That story's not out. But I'm me. I'm clear about my standards. I don't waver from those. Would it were the case that I ran, it be for all New Yorkers, and especially those who look like the people on this screen, because that's what I'm worried about.
And last question, before we wrap this up, we have someone asking, how do you respond to the Wells Fargo CEO saying that there isn't an adequate talent pool of diverse candidates, that your resumes are exceptional but not rare in your communities?
That's an easy response. I can find a whole bunch of people who just reach out and ask the question. We can get the talent. I'm confident we can get the talent. I was at SEO, 425 students or so, representing a whole bunch of colleges and universities that are out there. You just got to look hard. Maybe you don't have to look that hard. Just ask somebody. So I respond to that in general. I presume that the CEO's got some view of the world and he's come out and apologized for it. And so I assume that they're going to go forward and make a concerted effort to identify that existing population, and amongst that existing population, who would want to work at Wells Fargo.
And I think, look, I'm in a little freer position than Ray, who's a statesman, who's also represents a global brand and everything else. I think that because it's so important, I have so many talented friends who have been in positions to grow and who've been cut short and all of those other things. I think he just has to decide where he wants to be. Wells Fargo as an organization, there has been, there never will be a shortage of talent, whether it's women, whether it's minorities or what have you. But look, if he took the same approach that he did for one of his chief of staffs who are 2 years out of HBS and report to the CEO, then we would have a whole different situation. So I think it goes back to whether you want to expand the pie, whether if it's something that you really, a metric that you really want to achieve, then think creatively and invest in people. It's that simple. And by not doing that, you do cost communities a lot. And but I think we're now in an environment, and I hope it lasts, to where people are also recognizing that mentality, that old approach, is actually also costing companies. And so, I don't think leaders will thrive and may not even survive over the next generation or so with that kind of approach. So there's a lot of people I think that will help guide folks who have outdated thinking, that are responsible for billions and trillions of dollars to sort of get themselves ready for the next phase of new leadership. But and hopefully he's one of those folks. But the talent is never and will never be a question.
Carla, thank you so much. Ray and Ernie, investments in ourselves, they look like making sure that you're not invisible, so filling out the census, making sure your voice is heard so that you are registering to vote, making sure that once you're registered to vote and that you go out and vote, that you share your knowledge and your information so that we all can be educated and know what's at stake. We are going to be okay if we invest in ourselves. And I love the fact that Ray, you said that there is no plan B. We are the leaders that are going to work our way out of this. It can be uglier or it can be even more beautiful, but ultimately there is no plan B, and we're the ones that are going to be the heroes in this story. So I appreciate this conversation coming from a space of men of color, of Black men, being intersectional, being able to recognize women and struggles of folks, whether it be trans, whether it be Hispanic Heritage Month, which I'm excited to say that coming up at my first office hours in October 13th, we're going to have a conversation to make sure that we celebrate that in a big way, in earnest. We are thankful for the investment that Citibank has made into Citizens Committee, and for all the heroes that are showing up on their blocks and in every institution. And I just wanted to give Ernie and Ray one last chance to give some parting words, because I know you have to go, but really blessed and excited by this conversation. So Ernie first, please.
I thank Ray once again. He's been a blessing to me and the family. I am excited about our city's rebuild, excited about our relationships with Rasan and citizens in New York. And as you said, I think we just continue to work to rebuild the city. And I would encourage everybody to find their own Ray, because we're going to need it through this period, but it's restoring, and it helps keep us focused as a family and as leaders as we work to continue to build into the next phase. So thank you, Ray.
Dr. Rashawn and Ernie Lyles, listen, I am honored to be here with you. I'm confident. I see the future. I stand on the giants of the past. My vision is that as this torch gets passed, that I have every confidence, conviction that you will be able to take the torch, that you have a vision of the future, and that our future is going to be much better than the past, notwithstanding how glorious the current is. Mm. And there is no plan B. And as that man from Brooklyn says, if you don't know, now you know. Thank you all. Be blessed.
And with that, that ends our conversation, our rebuilding conversation for New York City. We thank you. Be on the lookout for the next ones, and have a great rest of your day.